Good evening to everybody, and thank you for joining us in this 1-hour webinar related to green finance and its potential over different types of webinars. So today's meeting is focused on the implementation of the green finance within different sectors, and it's going to be like a speech, a talk to focus on the different macro concepts. We have here different experts proceeding from different fields, and the idea is to grasp the main concept from each of them, just to have an overall conception of the green finance. So let me introduce today's speaker. And we have Rafael Torres, co-founder and managing director of Lux Capital Americas, and they operate within Europe and the America, South and North America in the investment field. We have Katerina Fedorova, a lawyer from the CBA office in Milan, and she's an expert for the ESG requirements and the implementation of the green finance at a legal level. And we have David Alvarez, executive director of EcoAXA, which provides green finance related services at the international level. So thank you guys for joining us today, and we are now starting the real webinar. It's gonna be set up like a talk, so I will introduce 5 topics, and we'll give each of the speakers a time to answer, so we can focus on different things as well. Okay. So I guess the first idea is, what is green finance, and what does green finance mean within the different sectors, the different segments. So I would ask Rafael to start first, and then we'll pass to the others.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alessandro, and all the participants during the webinar. It's a pleasure to be here today. Well, green finance is for hospitality business and investment point of view. Some years ago, it was something that 10 or 12 hoteliers were considering as sustainability, but they were not focused on the very initial base on the investment. No? Now on, especially in America and in some of the countries of Europe, there's more focus on how to do the right process to do the right investment, and having also the point of view of how to be green, how to focus on how to be more profitable on some of the aspects, not only on the P&L, but also on focus on tax incentives, bonus density, all the permitting, and in some projects, if you don't have the green policy, you can access to the permission. Also, the loans, some banks are now very sophisticated on having a green policy and focus on that. Technical assistance, net metering, public campaigns. I mean, all these aspects do that the green finance pass to the #1 priority in some of the investment. And especially now that this COVID period brought us to the table another completely vision on the investment, I think that the green finance aspect will be more and more one of the aspects to be evaluated in every single investment. No? This is the first view that we can say from an investment point of view on green finance.
Katerina, what do you think?
Yeah, well, thank you, first of all, to invite me and as a speaker. And yeah, I work in real estate field as a lawyer. And real estate was and still is hugely influenced by green finance. And green finance is a structured financial activity that's been created in order to ensure a better environmental situation. And of course, environment in real estate is crucial. And as we know, green finance comprises, let's say, huge amount and heterogeneous sort of group of investments which involve financial projects and products that encourage the development of sustainable economy. And with particular reference to the real estate, the green finance, as I said, has still a huge impact in this field. Here we talk about significant part of business which goes from renewable energy to real estate transformation, and these investments that what we see now in the market really booming. Then asset management companies, they really started to have an integrated approach to which influences all the stages and the steps that they need to cover in their investment policy. So starting from the creation of new products to evaluation and to due diligence and to requalification and maintenance and up to disinvestment phase, everything has been, let's say, changed or influenced in some way by the green finance. So we can truly say that the real estate world has changed a lot.
And is changing still. David, what do you think?
Okay, thank you so much for the invitation to this very interesting webinar as well. For us, it's a pleasure to be here and share this webinar with our colleagues. From our side, from a technical point of view, what we do, we help all the companies to start in and get strategies and work with green finance. From our side, as I mentioned, green finance is a way to reorientate the flows of investments to new targets linked to neutral economy in terms of carbon, or how to get this new roadmap created by the European Commission, and how to get to this new European Green Deal. But not only in terms of climate change, but also linked to how companies reduce the pollution, and how do they protect biodiversity, and how, as I mentioned at the beginning, how all these investments can be reorientated to new investments that protect all these environmental aspects, and how to create the good framework or the correct framework to do so. Based on that, one of the main activities, and very much linked to the creation of a green finance framework, is the creation of the taxonomy or other tools that might speak later. But in summary, from our point of view, green finance is a way to reorientate the flows of investment to a positive economy for the environment.
It's interesting to see, because each of us has different feelings about this, because for us as engineers and technicians, green finance represents another way to focus on our issues. We've been doing sustainability applied to buildings and real estate for more than 10 years now, and we now see that the green finance asks us to implement basically similar calculations, similar things that we were doing for buildings, but to corporate level, to company levels, to using the tools like you cited, like taxonomy and everything, apply what we were thinking when developing green buildings now to the corporate level and to a wider range of activities. So thank you for the first one. The second topic we would like to talk about is what are the new challenges that the green finance brings us? Because, you know, new rules, new things, new requirements. And so every sector will be and is being hit by this thing. Rafael, what do you think?
Yeah, this is one of the most important things. These new rules, new things, new vision, new way of living makes that all new investment that focus on green finance and hospitality make that you have to have the right advisor, you know, because sometimes some groups, hotels groups, they want to develop an hotel, but they don't have the right advisor, and they are slow on the process because the bank asking for some new rules, new things. So I think nowadays it's crucial to have the right advisor to develop any green project. And from a P&L point of view, and also on maybe sometimes the investment needs to be higher, but in long term, you see the performance, you see the results. You approach to a different client, to a different guest that look for this kind of projects. So I think in this point, Alessandro, it's crucial to have the right advisor and the right way to develop the right project. You know.
Mm-hmm. Caterina?
Well, I think that one of the biggest challenges in real estate is rethinking the building, because you need to respect a lot of requirements. So you need to respect what is the local habitat, what is the local situation on the place where you build a house or whatever. And so you need to implement in the investment process all these new things that we are talking about, right? This all the environmental requirements the companies have now. This is one of the things. So to rethink the strategy of the investment and the process of it, of course. And of course, for the Italian companies, especially if we're talking about small, medium enterprises, one of the biggest challenges is to invest in sustainability in order to increase the competitiveness on the market. So it's very much, let's say, reputational issue. But in order to invest in sustainability at this stage, you really need to believe in that, because it requires you to, like, the driver comes from a strong ethical point of view. So you need really to believe in sustainability, because it's not going to be a very fast sort of investment. So it's really medium, long-term investment. But of course, it helps the reputational situation of a company, especially if we are talking of investment company, but doesn't really matter, because then you have a supply chain, right? And the people your suppliers, you need to sort of send a message that now that green finance is really booming, that you respect that and you comply with that and you believe in that, but because you have to. And that sort of, in my opinion, is going to be, well, the future, let's say.
Exactly. David?
You mentioned challenges. I think there are a lot of challenges depending the way you see it. Challenges are different if you're speaking for a corporate, or if you're speaking for a bank, or if you are speaking to an equity fund or a fund manager. What I see is that green finance, it's a new way to see finance, and we will see, we have seen it, as Caterina mentioned, that green finance has been booming for the last few years. We are seeing big transformation of the finance sector, and that will change a lot of practicalities that we've been doing for the last years, and that will completely shift to another new model in the new years. That means that banks, corporates, insurance sectors, or funds will need new skills to manage this situation, because it's going to change, or they're going to have new requirements in terms of compliance, in terms of new skills to know how to measure their impact in terms for climate change, for biodiversity, for circular economy, how to transfer this impact to economic valuations, and in order to include them in their cost of capitals. How do they manage with taxonomy? How do they report these impacts or dependencies and risk, and a lot of issues? So it's interesting to see how the regulation for this green finance and sustainable finance is going to change the behavior of the different stakeholders involved in this arena, and how is it changing in terms of risk and opportunities, and in order to be aware of new tools and opportunities.
Yes, I just wanted to mention a couple of things, because you both, well, all you three mentioned it. I think that with the green finance, and starting from the Paris Agreement, the Green Deal, the taxonomy, everything, the bottom line is that sustainability is not an option anymore. And so since we've been working within sustainability during a lot of time, but it was mainly for let's say an advertisement feedback, an image enhancement, something that comes back, but it's not mandatory. Now, the problem is that the market and the market segments we've been developing as a society through the last decades did not consider sustainability at all. And people wanted to do it, but it was a wish. As Caterina said, it was more an ethical move than a mandatory. And now is not an option anymore. So a lot of companies that we saw have been procrastinating, but they have to right now. And so the real challenge, I guess, is to change the way of doing business on the go, because nobody will say from tomorrow, okay, we'll stop doing this and we'll start doing the other way, because the banking system, the financial system is way too settled in order to reset it from scratch. And so the key challenge for us that we are seeing is to be able to change the way of doing business and of doing investments on the move, on the go, without losing sustainability potential nor clients. And we are coming to this in the next question. We see that green finance, it brings also a lot of opportunities more than challenges. And so we are coming up with the next question. I just wanted to remind the audience that you can ask questions throughout the chat of our YouTube channel. So please feel free to do so. At the end of the webinar, we have 10-15 minutes spared to answer the questions. So please let us know what your ideas are. Coming up with the next questions, I already anticipated it, but so we talked about challenges. What are the opportunities that we saw within the green finance sector within your segments? Rafael?
Yeah, I think there's a huge opportunity, you know. Just to give you an example, some tour operators and travel agencies, they don't book any more hotels that they don't have any sustainability plan, or even they don't have a green finance investment plan from the very beginning. For example, TUI, they 1 of 10 travelers in TUI book a sustainable room, you know. So this is these kind of things make you to understand that, as you were saying at the beginning, there's no more options anymore. So, I mean, all the projects in the future has to have the right vision on green sustainability, the right vision on green investment, and as I was saying at the beginning, some countries and some ban system are more sophisticated than others, but in some years, and not very long, all the countries probably will be in the same page, and especially with this period that we've been living in the last 2 years, all will be focused on green and green finance. No,
Katerina?
Yeah, we were talking first about challenges, and now we're talking about opportunities. And I have a feeling that they are interconnected. They have a really strong connection between them. Because if you think that, well, green finance, let's say, considers ESG, which is environmental, government, and social requirements. And if you think within social requirements, for example, there is a diversity and inclusion. And it is a challenge, but it is also an opportunity, right? So if you say, like, if you look at it from the different point of view, you see that the opportunities or the challenge actually becomes an opportunity. So that's one thing. So you actually, you can do so much more using green finance applied to any kind of field, any sphere of business. And another thing is, because the driver comes from the investors, and we see now that really these are the investors who sort of change the market and change the way people do business. This kind of request has to be met by the management companies, and they have actually a possibility to sort of change the investment strategy and following the requests of the investors. And I think that's a huge opportunity, because you actually see and you know exactly what the investors need and what they look for, and you can, I don't say easily meet all the requirements, but sort of you got the idea. This is an opportunity. This is the market which dictates you what it needs in this moment. So I think that yeah, the challenges become opportunities actually.
Exactly. David?
Yes, in fact, risk and opportunities are two sides of the same coin. So we are at the time to address these opportunities, and I really think, as my colleagues, that there are a lot of opportunities, much more than risk, even if you have to face them. As you mentioned previously, Alessandro, of course, sustainability is not an option right now. Sustainability is a must. And of course, it's not fully implemented at the real life way of behavior of our companies, or if you mainly if we think in the way our SMEs or so on works, but it's something that is going to swiftly change in the next years. What I see regarding the opportunities is that if we see how green finance, for instance, green bonds or sustainable linked loans or so on, has increased during the last 5 or 10 years in the market, we have seen that there is an increasing number of funds and investment in this, for an average of growing over 15 or 20% per year, and which a high return from investment. So there is a growing opportunity in this regard. Also for corporates, green finance provides new opportunities to access when you meet these requirements for sustainability, to access to a different source of finance at a cheaper rate, which is something very interesting for corporates. But not only this, it allows them to have different ways or to find different ways to find opportunities to get finance, and not only to the old channels that they were used to do so. So it's a way to diversify the way they get opportunities, and the way to access to new channels for finance at a best rate.
Well, thank you, all of you. From our perspective, another idea is that green finance may be the driver, because we've been hearing that sustainability is the future, it will come, and that, but I guess that until now there hasn't been any driver strong enough to drive, to move all the other sectors. So now green finance coming, and this actually was the point of the European Commission and the guys developing those regulations. Will start from the finance sector because it's the one funding all the others. And so first of all, a big opportunity to go green, I mean, to go sustainable, at least once for all. And then the second thing it would be to see and to evaluate things from what they value, from their value, not from their price. We buy a product depending on the costs of its production, not on the costs of the object, because the object has to be disposed later on. It has to be, I mean, these things are seen through the life cycle analysis, which are implemented only in very few processes right now. The green finance, the CO2 footprint, and all the things that comes with it will impose this in the future. You, David, can tell us an hour later on about the risk that related to green finance, climate change, that have never considered before, and now they're starting to be implemented within the financial models, the banking, risk management, and all this kind of things. We'll start now the following questions, which I also anticipated a bit. So we've been talking about the green finance, what it is for the different sectors, the challenges and the opportunities. Now, I guess our audience would like to see which tools do we have at disposal in order to make it real. So how do you think we can implement the green finance within your own sector, and which tools do we have at disposal? Rafael?
Well, tools, as I was saying at the beginning, the thing that I recommend every single investor is to find the right advisor, because sometimes it's a little bit complex, and there's in every single country you find different incentives, different permission, different things on how to focus on the green sustainability, on the green finance project. So I think the tools are always focused also on the behavior of the stakeholders also, and then also on the final behavior of the clients. And it depends on each country you are talking about. You can have some tools or other. For example, in Colombia, that we closed one green finance project, you have some permissions and incentives and exclusions that you don't have in other countries. That, for example, in Italy, or for example, in the United States, that you have different tools. So my recommendation is that have the right advisor to focus on the right process, on the right green finance development project at the end of the day.
Yeah, sure. Caterina?
Yeah, well, when we're talking about real estate, as I said, the investor drives the market. So the investor needs to understand the strategy of the investment, needs to understand how green it is, if it is compliant, etc. So in order to do that, you need to have a clear ESG strategy. So when we're talking about real estate asset, for example, you need to do your due diligence, of course, on the asset, highlighting the ESG aspects. So, for example, from environmental point of view, you need to consider, for example, the energy consumption of the asset, right? Or the materials, or if renewable energy was used, the location, transportation, sort of things. From a social point of view, for example, if you have a controversial tenants, that's one of the issues. If there is like gambling, for example, business there, or you need to consider the community development, the inclusion and diversity, as I mentioned before, and from the point of view, from the governance point of view, the anti-bribery, money laundering, the data protection and privacy. So all these aspects need to be considered and then need to be implemented into the investment process, so into the decision process. So that's the ESG policy is one of the things, of the tools we have. Then we have, of course, if we're talking about, well, both, let's say, the instruments in order to fulfill the green economy. So green bonds, for example, right? Or the social bonds, when you have a social, let's say, requirement to fulfill a social scope of work. So then you can use, you can get the social bonds. Or, for example, now there is a launch of benefit companies, which are the companies that in their bylaws, they have a commit, so they actually consider in their bylaws formally, they commit to create public benefit and sustainable value in addition to generate profit. And then we have B Corp companies, which are, it's different from benefit companies, as you have actually a certificate for well, let's say, what kind of scope of work you are trying to fulfill. So all this, you can see how, let's say, how real estate has really truly been changed and influenced, and how many instruments now we have in order to sort of follow the green economy, green finance.
Thank you, Katarina. David, anything to add?
Yes, of course. So you mentioned tools. There are a lot of tools in the market, depending on the goal that you might have regarding the different aspects of green finance, as mentioned during this webinar. From a technical point of view, what we think that it's getting the most important one, it's first of all to know if your activity is really sustainable or green. And this is good to know either from the finance point of view, to know if the activity in which you are investing is sustainable or not. And if you're a corporate, to know if the operations that you're making are sustainable as well, and you can access to green finance. The best tool to make this assessment right now is the EU taxonomy, was released that was released last year and was adopted for climate mitigation and adaptation access this year with the delegated acts of the Council and the European Parliament. Sorry, and this tool will be also evolve, or will evolve during this year, not only for climate change mitigation and adaptation activities that provide positive impacts on climate change regarding adaptation and mitigation, but also to other environmental aspects like circular economy, water, pollution, and other do no significant harm, which includes biodiversity and so on. This is the first one, but we can forget in this equation of green finance the risk side of this part, and this is a very important point not only for corporates but also for investors. A few years ago, the TCFD framework was launched to assess how climate change impacts on the EP&L of a company. So it provides a framework to really understand how climate change might impact in economic terms to the economic profit of a company. And this TCFD framework provides good framework, I'm sorry for repeating the word, on how to assess this climate change risk. In order to do so, there are 5 axes that a company, either a finance one or a corporate, should consider. Governance, I mean, how the organization is disclosing the organization governance around climate change, and how is it included in the board of directors, and the way these risks are managed. To set how do they set a strategy on in that case climate change, and how is it which are the risks and opportunities for every organization, and how are they managed, and how is the resilience of the company to manage this impact now and in the future regarding the different scenarios of climate change. And other parts are risk management, how the organization is, how do they describe the impacts and dependencies on climate related risk, how are they managed, and the process to identify, assess these climate related risks. And last but not least, which are the metrics and targets that the companies do have. I think this framework is a very useful framework for corporates and bankings, and a lot of financial institutions mainly, but also corporates, are adopting this framework around the world, not only to report their impacts, their internal financial impacts on climate change, or arising from climate change, but also to manage this risk. In addition to that, we can't forget the other tools that, for instance, the European Commission has released, the climate benchmarks for a benchmark for ESG disclosures, or the just released or just launched a framework not only for climate change but also for nature financial related risk, which is called the Task Force on Nature Financial Related Disclosure, that was launched last week by UNEP FI and a lot of international high-level organizations, and that will be developed during the next 2 years, and that will include not only climate risk but also nature-related risk linked to soil, biodiversity, water consumption, water impact, pollution, and so on. Of course, in addition to that, there are a lot of there are a range of tools to measure these impacts in ecological or economic terms, but the list is so long that I think that I shouldn't tell the list as it is right now.
Thank you, David. You know, from our perspective, we see a lot of tools, all the tools that you cited, embedded within the strategies, the strategy of the banks, the strategy of investment funds. The thing is that there are different layers, different levels of detailing these actions, because the one thing is what to do and the other thing is how to do it. the CO2 footprint is something that nowadays most of the people have it in mind, but the way to calculate it, there are so many ways to do it that it could be a 2 days work or 1 year work for the same product. So what we see, for example, and Rafael, correct me if I'm wrong, is that some investment funds base their businesses on the Sustainable Development Goals. So the United Nations SDGs, since they are international, they want the buildings to meet such standards, or the LEED standards, which is American, the BREEAM standard, just to have a quality benchmark or a sustainability benchmark. The thing is that the SDGs are quite broad defined, and the way to do it can vary a lot. So our advice is that we do have at disposal all the tools that you mentioned, but in order to build an effective strategy, you have to know what you're dealing with. If you focus on the CO2 emissions or the energy, for example, efficiency, or renewable resources, you have to know the metrics, as David mentioned, and you have to know how they are calculated before building the strategy. Otherwise, it's like going blind, because you know which way to go, but you're not seeing where you're going. Do you agree, or?
Absolutely, fully agree. I mean, not only some funds, some private equity investor and institutional, before study the project, they ask for this green policy, There's some minimum standards that, for example, some new hotels are using to optimize the investment, the efficiency of the ventilation of the guest rooms, the renewable energy, the efficiency of the water use, the materials and waste. What is there's some policies to be followed to develop a green finance project that some years ago no investor were looking for, and now it's a priority. It's a must.
Exactly.
They don't do any investment on hospitality if you don't have that rule. So from now on, I think that as I was saying at the beginning, it's crucial to have the right leader to develop a green project on the market. Yeah.
Yes, I fully agree with you all. And as you partially mentioned, Alexandra, I think it depends on your goal and your ambition. And depending on your goal, your ambition, you should take one of other tool. It's important to highlight as well that regarding what Rafa mentioned, that this is how do I say, a changing ecosystem, and we're building right now how to assess sustainability, and we're in the process to have the full knowledge of the real impact of companies. And in this path, what we have now is what Rafa mentioned: different policies for different sectors, mostly at a qualitative level, that you have a checklist of you meet with this or these requirements, but how the world or how this is evolving, it's not only to have this checklist requirement, but also to measure the different impacts, and if possible, in terms of climate change and in terms of biodiversity and circular economy, to transfer these impacts to economic value, to really understand the real cost of capitals in real economy transfers, in order to know what the real impact of your activity, not only for your side, but also the real impact for the society. Yeah, in this regard, the European Commission is working very hard, and there are several projects dealing with this issue to have an integrated and harmonized way to, for instance, to assess and calculate natural capital in economic terms. And probably in the next few years, we'll have more news about how to assess the impact for companies in economic ways.
Thank you. Katerina, I don't know if you want to add something.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Fully agree with what you said, and we actually see that there is a. If we're talking, for example, about climate change, you mentioned it before, that as investors they want to know the strategy before the investment has been carried out, and we've noticed there is a change into what you pay attention to. If before, and here we're talking about climate change, the real estate professionals, operators were mostly trying to prevent climate-related issues. Now they are trying to more focus how to generate profit with a more sustainable way. So this is a complete change of the strategy, right? So yeah, I completely agree with what you are saying. It shouldn't be only like you have a benchmark, you have a list of requirements to meet, and it's only a quantity requirements. But of course, you need to, as I mentioned before, you actually need to believe in that, because you know that it's not only how to decrease certain parameters, but it's also how to have overall, let's say, beneficial impact on environment.
Thank you, Katerina. We move on to the last topic, and then we'll try to answer the questions, because we already have two coming up. So real quick, what actions or step should we take, or do you think we should take in order to implement the green finance effectively in your sectors? Rafael?
Well, I think that the actions that we recommend to done is some groups, hotels groups, for example, they already have their own departments and they know exactly what to do and what are the next steps to do. But in some cases where there's no branded or there's not any headquarter or company, we recommend to put you in hands that can help you from the very beginning and focus on the right kind of investment. No? I think this is priority, because sometimes some people think that they know exactly what to do, but they start the process and they realize
exactly
that we do that before, so you have lost 2 months, and these 2 months represent money and time and a lot of things. So I think from the very beginning, it's very important that you put on the right hands to start developing the right green finance project to arrive to the goal. No? And this is what we recommended. No.
Yeah, I was laughing because it happens to us all the time, because they call us in 6 months after they started, and we have to catch up with everything.
It represents a lot of money in some projects, you know.
And exactly.
And in terms of investment and in terms of professional working on the project, so it's very important that in the checklist, once you want to start an investment project, you put in the priority number 1 or number 2 the green goal.
Yeah. Katerina.
Well, I think that, of course, you need to do your due diligence on whatever you're investing in. You need to try, exactly as Rafael said, you need to have an advisor who actually knows what he's doing, and you need to, let's say, who helps you to move towards what is your strategy, what's your mission, what's your goal. But then I think that, well, in my particular field, which is real estate, I think that the next, if we're talking about next steps, and it's always hard to say what's going to be necessary in future. It's hard to see future, but I think that one of the next steps going to be a more a sort of well, I want to say confusion between technical advisors and legal advisors, because actually all of these benchmarks we were talking about before, they need to be understood first by us, actually by legal advisors. Okay, I of course I'm not a constructor, right? And of course I will, let's say, try to understand as much as I can from a technical point of view this all of those requirements, because as a lawyer, of course, when I see a requirement, I see it from a legal point of view. But I think that in future it's going to be a little bit, well, I want to say confusion. It's not really, let's say cooperation.
Let's say
between,
tricky.
Yeah. But it's going to be like a sort of cooperation between technical advisors and legal advisors.
David.
Okay, I think it depends if you're a bank or if you're corporate, but if you're at the beginning of the process, I fully agree with Rafa. The first step is to have a good advisor. And as we've been speaking during this webinar, to have good advisory team means in this arena to have different advisors for different purpose, because this is a very new new arena where you need a lot of skills in different areas. I mean, finance, sustainability, legal, and so on. And so, first of all, advisory. Second, try to build these skills within your company. It's important to have a good team to manage this area of green finance, even either if you are in a bank or in a fund or in a corporate, because you might need it in the future for sure. And there are new positions called green sustainable finance chief manager or so on that are starting to be created, and that I'm pretty sure that in the future these positions will be required. And later on, it depends on how do you want to evolve in that. But once you have this team, I think the next one is you really know, if you're a corporate, how sustainable you are if you are not in this topic right now. Of course, large corporates have been working on this for a long time, but small and medium-sized enterprises not, and it's something that they should consider. And we have the taxonomy to see to what extent do they meet the requirements for sustainability. And of course, if you are not a corporate, you are a bank or you're a fund manager, start to test your portfolio in order to see how your investments are sustainable or not, because probably you can get different products depending on the sustainability of your portfolio.
Yes, thank you. I just add one quick thing, and which brings us to the reason why we are here today. I think that one of the main things is going to be education. So educate technicians, people, investors, bankers, everybody about sustainability. Because if you tell them, I want this thing to be sustainable, it means everything and nothing. So that's, by the way, one of the main purposes of this webinar. And the second key concept is integration, as Katerina and Rafael also mentioned. There is a huge need of integration in between different sectors. And from our perspective as technicians, we can tell you that this thing is required and is being required not only within the green building sector, green finance sector, so the sustainability sector, but also from the management point of view, from the technical point of view. There are new technologies and new ways to develop projects, building projects, construction projects, like the building information modeling, the integrated IPD, integrated project delivery, the lean approach, that are possible only if the sectors are integrated. And so to think upfront what your goals are and how you're going to reach them. And so that's the second purpose of this meeting, merging different sectors and different ideas just to have a global perspective on the issue. Thank you, guys, for participating. Now we have at least a couple of questions that just came through. And the first brings us back to the things that we were saying before we started. We had just a short meeting before 4 o'clock. And what timeline do you see for the green finance to be applied within the European market? We were saying that right before we started. So I don't know, Rafael, Caterina, David, we should pick up from where we left the chat before.
Well, yeah, if we're talking about like the timeline, I think that the green finance has been accelerated by the COVID. We were not actually expecting that to be as fast as it's growing now. So I think that the timeline that has been like scheduled, let's say, before the COVID, it doesn't really exist. So it's actually a very much accelerated process, what I see from the market. So like everybody is implementing the ESG, everybody's changing their policies, like in every really sphere, in every field. I talk about my field, of course, which is real estate, but I actually see it like everywhere, as you guys probably do. So actually, well, it's hard to say, like to give you a strict timeline, but it's gonna be, it's getting fast. It's getting there in a very fast way, I think.
Rafael, I don't know, you mentioned the banking system speed.
I agree. I think that the only thing that I would like to add to Caterina or what she said, some countries are more sophisticated than others, and they're a little bit more advanced than others. But I'm fully agree with what Caterina was saying. And in the next 2-3 years, probably the whole European countries will be on the same line. You know.
We see we've been working with some international banks headquartered in Spain, but they work all around the world. I mean, they've been working on the green finance, being bigger than others. They've been working on the green finance since the last 6, 7, 8 years. Now I see Italian banks are start moving since 1-2 years ago. Austrian banks are starting moving as well. So yes, it's coming faster and faster, I guess. David, something to add?
Yes, I think the speed depends on the country, as Rafa mentioned. And for instance, there are banks that has already mentioned or included within their strategies that there will be neutral for CO2 or biodiversity by 2030 or 2035. So that means that the day after tomorrow for in market time. This is also that we need to consider as a risk, as a transition risk, because the way that the society evolves on that way, it's something to be considered, because not all companies have the same ability to change depending on how quick these policies comes into, or policies or markets comes into reality. But I really think that during this decade we're gonna see a very large change and shift of behavior.
Thank you. The last question is, will the size of the banks or funding entities have different impacts on the implementation of the green finance principles? Oof, I think so, but I don't know. I'll let you answer first, and I'll add my piece at the bottom. Rafael?
Well, I think at the end of the day, all the banks and the policies will be on the same page. But it's the same that the first question. It depends on every country. We've been working in different countries, and we have different samples, and every single country works in a different way, and the banks works in a different way. So it depends on the country you are focused. I don't know, Caterina and David, what do you think about?
Yeah, probably, Rafael, you have a let's say, more global view of countries, because what I see on the European level, yeah, it's going to be, well, let's say European legislation goes into the one direction, which is different from the USA, for example, or the South America, for example, right? So it's slightly different, let's say. The European countries, they go into one direction in what kind of policies they need to have, etc. So yeah, I think that on the European level, it's going to be more, let's say, in harmony, probably.
It's a real good question. The European Action for Finance Plans, it's working on this regard in order to harmonize the way that all requirements in terms of taxonomy, benchmarks, ESG are considered, to harmonize them in the same way. And even though the taxonomy is thought only for European, it's starting to be adopted or followed by other countries. Sorry. So that means there is a sort of harmonization around the world, and I think during the next years we will go on the same page on that. In terms of, for instance, ESG indicators, there's an international controversy on that, depending on who provides you these indicators and which are the data that you need for them. But there is a global agreement that there must be an harmonized framework for all of them.
Thank you. Yes, we see that larger banks, for example, are moving faster on these topics. Smaller banks are still struggling. I guess that the bigger the entity, the finer the system they could put in place, but eventually they'll come to the same page. We are now seeing, for example, in the US with the new Biden administration, which came back to the Paris Agreement, a big move and toward the green finance, and it's starting to gain momentum again. So yes, I guess that all the banks and fundings entity will come to the same page, but with different speeds. No more questions. I would like to thank you, first of all, the speakers, Rafael, Caterina, and David, for joining us today, and all the audience. I hope the webinar fulfilled your requests, and please let us know if you have further questions, doubt, or need of information. We are Green Building Factory, and thank you for joining us today. Bye-bye, and thank you to all the speakers again.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.